Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is constantly learning and growing as a sports geek, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to Sports Geek. This is episode 324 of Sports Geek. On this episode, I chat with David Pryles. He is the CEO of Hockey Australia. You can find this episode, as always, at sportsgeekhq.com. Put a /324, the episode number. You will find the show notes and links to this episode. You can always find it at sportsgeekhq.com, and you can always find it on several podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts. If you can't find the podcasts, please let me know. But if you're listening to this, I guess you found it, so that's probably a little bit redundant. Otherwise, you can always contact me via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com, or Sean Callanan on most platforms. So last week, I spoke to Javier Gutierrez from the Arizona Coyotes. If you haven't listened to that, go back. But that's one form of hockey, the NHL. And now we move to the other form of hockey, field hockey, where I talk to David at Hockey Australia. So they're both Olympic sports. One is a winter sport dominated by nations that have colder climates than obviously skate as a part of the Winter Olympics. So very much dominated by the Northern Hemisphere. And then we've got field hockey, which is a vastly different, it has similar sport, but a vastly different player participation base and different professional structure. And so in this conversation, I chat to David about that, about one, his career across multiple sports, but then now working as a CEO of a NSO, National Sports Organisation, in an Olympic sport like hockey, and some of the opportunities and challenges of working in a sport like hockey. So I hope you enjoy this chat with David Pryles from Hockey Australia. Very happy to welcome David Pryles. He is the CEO of Hockey Australia. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem at all, as I normally do with most of my conversations. How did you get your start in the world of sports business? Because it wasn't really your first foray. You were out doing other things to begin with.
Yeah, so I studied an economics and finance degree, and actually studied in Denmark a semester, and then came back and worked in investment banking for a Swiss firm, and then a Singaporean firm. And like most Melburnians loving sport, I wanted to turn that into my passion into a full-time career. So at the slender age of 32, I joined the sports industry.
So you're working in corporate finance and had a fairly extensive career there, and then you started working the commercial sales at Cricket Victoria, and then a similar role at Melbourne City. What were those first couple of roles, and how did they sort of give you a bit of a grounding? Was it a bit of a shock to the system coming from a corporate world into the world of sport?
Yeah, even going back, I volunteered. That's a bit of advice I have for other people as well, as I volunteered in the industry in football. So I worked for 4 years at Essendon in recruiting, and I networked and more networked. And over a 2-year period, I came second for 3 jobs in sport because I didn't have the sports experience. I was lucky enough that I got through those stages. I sent in a lot of applications and didn't even get an interview. But joining Cricket Vic was great. I put together a presentation, so went over and above. I love cricket, so really wanted to get my chance. And yeah, it was an eye opener. It was very different. I was working across 3 different brands, which meant I was effectively reporting into 3 different people, both at the Stars, Renegades, and Cricket Vic. So that was quite challenging, but it was great because that was, moving into the first year of Channel 10 broadcast. So that was when the Big Bash was going to the next level. It was great to be part of that, and then getting the opportunity at Melbourne City after the acquisition was an amazing career experience. Working on a Monday night from midnight to 2 a.m. in global commercial calls with New York and London, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Manchester. It was just incredible and great people as well.
Yeah, well, recently had James Johnson on, and he had spent some time at Melbourne City, and again, the global operation of that, still being a club, but the Connect network you had as part of what they've done would have been an amazing experience. And so you were still in that sort of commercial partnership, sales, sponsorship sort of space, and that sort of led you to the PGA and your work there in going to another sport in golf.
Some of the best advice I got was one of the people I worked with Cricket Vic, and he said your next step has to be in a broader role. You need to see yourself as just more than just a salesperson. When I got the opportunity to go to the PGA, and I'm not a golf nut. I wasn't a golf nut. I really appreciate it now. It gave me the opportunity to work in a sport in a role which probably there weren't too many around. Tennis obviously has it, but I was working across broadcast, sponsorship, licensing, ticketing, merchandise, events, and they were big events. So that was an amazing experience, an amazing organisation to work for. I was fortunate enough in my last 12 months to work for the European Tour as well in the Asia Pac region. It kick-started my career. The CEO and Gab still the CEO there gave me the opportunity really to step up on the executive, and it just gave me such an experience that I'll forever be indebted to him and the organisation. It's a great sport to work in. It really is.
And it's quite funny, like early on, like when you were pitching for jobs at Cricket Vic and you go, I'm a cricket fan. That's where a lot of people come into the sport going, I'm a fan of. And even then when you were going across to golf, they're like, oh, hang on, he hasn't done anything in golf. Like that misconception of you've got to be in the sport to know the sport. Is that something that, I say it's a misconception. It's something you've come to realise now that you're looking to hire folk and bring them in, that they have to be, ingrained. It's an advantage if they love the sport, but you've also got to love the business of sport, I guess is the way I look at it.
Well, it's a career. You've got to be able to pay your bills. So my last 3 roles, I haven't come from within the sport, nor when I've gone to employ people, I haven't employed them from within the sport. I think it can cloud your judgment in some regards. And I think at the end of the day, it's a job. Yes, it's a great industry to be in. We love being in sport. I always say it's recession-proof, but at the end of the day, it's a career. And so you've got to really map out where you want to go. You can't just work for one organisation because you love them so much and you never want to leave them. I purposely have gone for jobs where I know I can make a difference through professional skills rather than just having the passion, so to speak.
Yep. And did that lead you to tackling your first CEO role at Softball Australia and spending a couple of years there?
It did. I gave myself, when I joined sport, obviously I joined sport late, I gave myself 5 years commercial director, 10 years CEO, and I was able to halve that. I wanted to take on a role where I could make a difference. And so the 3.5 years I spent at Softball, it was sort of proof to myself, more so than other people, that I can do the job. And we did it's a great sport full of absolutely passionate people. Like, you couldn't get more passionate people in the softball community. We turned around, it was a new format of the sport we introduced in Fully Loaded, and a new sort of format for broadcast, which was the SummerSlam, which Foxtel backed us on. We were able to get commercial support for it. We turned over the high performance team and set about a path to qualify for the Tokyo Olympics. We qualified for the Tokyo Olympics. Then COVID hit. And that was one of the hardest things I had to do, was conduct a Zoom call with all the players saying, well, your dream is on hold for 12 months. And then we were the team was the first team of any sport or country to go to Tokyo. So we had to get there to match play. So we got there 6 weeks prior. Next thing you know, I was interviewed live on BBC International TV twice. We're in the Time magazine, New York Times. We were everywhere like this. It went bananas, because obviously we went there during a state of emergency, and we were used as the guinea pig. But we didn't have one player or staff member who was sick, and no, we didn't get the results we wanted. But it was a very unique Olympic Games.
Yeah, definitely, and also that change. Your last 2 stops have been true Olympic sports. I mean, I know golf is an Olympic sport, but softball and hockey, that is their pinnacle. They've got their world champs, but performing on the Olympic stage, how is it different? Like you're at softball now, you're at Hockey Australia. The peaks and troughs and the planning that you have to do around those Olympic cycles, especially when normally they're 4 years. In this case, it's a compressed 3 years because of Tokyo being a year late. But how does that change the way you go about planning?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Specifically, coming into sport like hockey, where I thought the teams did really well in Tokyo based on a lack of international match play, and now it's all about getting matches into the squad. They're at very different stages of their life cycle, but it's all or nothing. If I'm going to be honest with you, more so from a funding perspective. The Kookaburras won their 7th gold medal in a row at the Com Games, and that was great. They dominated, but it doesn't really move the needle, so to speak. But the Olympics is where, well, ultimately it's the pinnacle. But it's also a way of recouping some funding that we've lost over previous years, and that's why it's all driven towards succeeding in Paris. And we're only less than 18 months away now, which is pretty exciting.
Well, that's the thing. You started in the role January 2022 at Hockey Australia. What were some of your first priorities, sort of once you got in the chair and got a lay of the land and saw what was there at Hockey Australia? What were some of the first things you wanted to tackle?
Well, we just come out with the Hockey Ruse program had just come out of a very, very independent review into the program. I was obviously new, and when I was appointed in October previously, we had to appoint a high performance director who actually started a month before I did, and a new president, and then we had to appoint a chief commercial officer. So the first port of call was we needed to get some commercial revenue in the door. We'd lost Ausdrill as the major partner of Hockey Ruse, as well as that funding cut. So we set about setting a tone to bring in new commercial revenue. We also own the independent review and the 47 recommendations that we were working on a daily basis. We had to build the rapport between the playing group and the administration, which I'm pleased by the data that we've got is going well. So they were the two key elements, and we're able to grow our non-government commercial revenue by over 50% year on year, which means now we can invest more in the program this year. But also with the review, we had to do everything right. So that was a key. And then, we ran a very public expression of interest for our High Performance Centre of Excellence. Now, the program's been based in Western Australia since 1984, and the deal with the government ends at the end of next year. So we set about putting together an expression of interest and went out to the community in March. Bids were due by June. We received 5 of them. We put together an assessment panel made up of a couple of very high-quality independent members, as well as some of our board members, site visits, meetings, interviews. We brought it down to 3, and the final 3 candidates presented to the Hockey Australia board in September. And then the board had a long deliberation, if I'm going to be honest, and we announced early December that Western Australia had kept the project, but they were building a brand new high-performance facility, and they were going to spend $135 million on doing so, which is a tremendous outcome for us as a sport, but also we're going to invest more in athlete health and wellbeing, so we can put on an extra athlete health and wellbeing manager full-time, as well as further investment in travel for the players to get back to their homes, and family and friends to come over as well.
I mean, yeah, like you said, WA's had a long history with hockey and with both the professional, both of the men's and women's teams. It's terrific to have that stability. Was that one of the key planks to then look at that? Launching your strategic plan was only released a couple of weeks ago. Was that being worked on in conjunction to say we need that stability from a facilities point of view, but what does the future of hockey look like?
Yeah, no, it was probably a little bit mutually exclusive.
Okay.
We had a set of criteria for in the expression of interest, which was helped put together by board staff and players. So players had an input as well. Our strategic vision, which we launched week and a half ago is centered around 4 strategic pillars, and that's growth, which ultimately is growth of playing, coaching, officials, volunteers, umpires. Digital, which is key pillar in most sports. I think that's probably the buzzword at the moment, that everyone wants to go digital. Sustainability, and that's financial performance as well as environmental. And heroes pillar. And the heroes pillar obviously links in. So you can see how they all link in together. And the heroes isn't just at international level. It's might be your under 12 coach who's your hero, because we all know that a very, very, very small percentage will go along into the pathways and ultimately represent Australia. So that's, I'm really proud that we've been able to launch it. We sort of restructured our game development team in line with the pillar. We're bringing in a new mobile app and broadcast agreement to fit the digital pillar. So there's a lot of work we've already started, but the high performance is probably, it's linked, but it wasn't why we've kept it in WA.
Yep. And then from a strategic point of view, like we talked about the Olympic cycles and these, 4-year cycles, but also in Australia, we've got Brisbane 2032 like on the horizon, on the long-term horizon. How do you balance, all sports across Australia are all going to be focused on success and success in that games. We've seen it before in Sydney with 2000. We saw the success that, the UK team had in London. Like, again, how do you balance that long-term, short-term? You've got 2 Olympic campaigns before then. How do you get that strategic plan to sort of weave into what might be a really great pinnacle in 2032 in our own backyard?
It's very different, our strategic vision. So it's only for 2 years. We only wanted to put together a strategic vision that we knew that we could ultimately hit all the key milestones in the next 2 years. Brisbane 2032, for me, it's less about it at the moment. And the reason why I say it's less about it is because we've got 2 Olympic Games where we, 1, need to get to, and 2, need to perform. And as I said, funding at the moment is built upon success at Olympic Games. And if I use last Tuesday as an example, where our Hockey Roos played Argentina, we're ranked 3rd in the world, Argentina's ranked 2nd in the world, and there's a fair gap. We had 7 players playing who would qualify for a Junior World Cup this year, and we beat them 2-0 with 2 disallowed goals. And so if we keep talking 2032, then they're probably hitting their prime in LA. And if we keep talking 2032, then we have players like Bartram, Paris, Kershaw, who are at the top of the game. Right? I'm missing out players, Squibb and all these players who are probably at the top of the game now, who are going to be cherry ripe in Paris. So we're selling them short. So it's the balance between, yes, we need to look longer term, but that's where the growth pillar comes into it. Because if we're doing our job and ultimately we've got more 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds coming through and playing our sport and then ultimately going through the pathway, they could be our next Olympians, right? So we may have people not even playing our sport who are going to represent our country in 2032. So we need to look after grassroots. So that's why I link 2032 with grassroots, and high performance really is we need to focus on Paris, then we need to focus on LA. And
you did mention recent games in Hobart, the Pro League Series. First time both of the teams have played in Australia since 2019. How important is just getting the Hockey Roos and the Kookaburras out on pitches in front of Australians for both, that heroes piece, but also that growth piece, because you can't beat if you can't see it. Just being able to see the best in action on home soil, again, super important. Is that something that in the next 2 years you want to see more of those games happening?
Yeah, absolutely. It was part of an operational plan presented to the board in April last year around more Kookaburras Hockey Roos games. We're fortunate we did a deal with the South Australian government where the Kookaburras played India in November, which was highly successful, and the Hockey Roos played in Sydney against China and Germany. And then obviously, as you said, Hobart. We've got the Hockey Roos playing in Adelaide in May. So, yeah, it is very important. And that's going to be predicated on our digital deal as well, and a new app and an OTT product that's continuing on at the moment. So we know every 4 years and even every 2 years at Com Games that everyone loves the Kookaburras and Hockey Roos. We're just going to ensure that it happens more often, because we know 3 million people watched it, the final in Tokyo, and the Kookaburras obviously just missed out. Well, I shouldn't say just missed out. We won a silver medal, but
that's also the historical standard that the Hockey Roos and the Kookaburras have set. The fact that, hockey people, we missed out. Where other sports, we have Andrew Gaze, blubbering on the broadcast because the Boomers have got a medal. That's the standard of success you've got at hockey, isn't it? That gold is expected. You've got the long history of very successful teams, and it's sort of the bar that you've got every time you turn up to Olympic Games, isn't it?
It is. But, the Hockey Roos haven't medalled for 20 years. So we all think about the golden generation of the Hockey Roos around 2000. And let me tell you, our Hockey Roos coach is one of them, in Katrina Powell. But, we haven't medalled in 20 years. So we need to get back on the podium. It's as simple as that. We need to, we want to get these girls back on the podium. Same as the Kookaburras. The Kookaburras, yes, we won silver. We're unlucky to not win gold. And we want to win. We want to win gold. We want to win 2 golds in Paris. So we're doing all we can now to give them the best preparation. We've got a tremendous high performance team led by Bernard Savage, who's been in rowing and triathlon and swimming and very experienced. So you got to trust your good people. You got to have good people in your organisation and trust them. And I'm glad that we have at the moment.
The other thing I wanted to ask, like you did talk about being with Big Bash in those early days at Channel 10, and Hockey One came back last year, rebooted, like starting in 2019 and then having to come back after COVID. How important is that to, that hero development, connection with fans, growth? Starting a new league is always tough, but then doing it with the pandemic in the middle makes it tough. What are some of the goals for Hockey One, and maybe also explain it to some of the listeners who don't know that it's Hockey Australia and the States working together to bring that league to life?
It's hugely important. So the inaugural competition was 2019. We rebooted after COVID last year, which I'm really pleased about. It's our highest form of open age content. So we don't have a national champs. We say MA, so each state except for Northern Territory has a team. They have a 10% shareholding in the league. Hockey Australia has a 30% shareholding, and it's effectively a home and away content, men and women, and hugely successful when it was broadcast just recently on Fox Sports and KO. The metrics were going in the right direction, both from a ticket sales, membership and broadcast perspective. It's played between October and November. This year will probably start a little bit earlier, so September through to the middle of November. And the players love it, absolutely love it. So, yes, it's a key component in building the Heroes pillar, in the growth pillar. So, linking it to our Hook into Hockey program, which we did successfully, and digital as well. So digital has a component. So we're looking to, maybe it's a fantasy game or tipping, and involved with it this year to help build the Heroes pillar. And it's not just about the Kookaburras Hockey Roos that are heroes. It's those players playing in the competition where little Josie, who plays at a hockey club where, one of the senior players has made the Hockey Club Melbourne team. She wants to go along and actually, watch that player. And it so happens that, a hockey roo like Amy Lawton or Kookaburra like Nathan Ephraim's is playing. So she can follow them as well. But that's the link really between, the heroes piece as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be Kookaburras Hockey Roos, and that's what Hockey One gives us.
And does it give you also, because similar to what Larry Kesselman and the NBL guys have done, hockey's a global game. There's people who love their hockey in the Netherlands, Argentina, different parts of the world. Is there also opportunities for that Hockey One content to be consumed and have people follow internationally that sort of makes the pie a little bit bigger, brings in different partners potentially?
Absolutely. Yeah, we had a broadcast across the world, and we've got a really good relationship with the other CEOs. The biggest market, I think, is India, having just been at the Men's World Cup in India and seeing, stadiums packed out with 20,000 people for hockey. Your eyes just widen and think, well, I can see why cricket, has gone to the next level because of India. And good luck to them, and good luck to the Women's Premier League, which has just commenced. I think it's fantastic. That's the opportunity we've got.
It is a real big opportunity because you've got other sports trying to get into India where it's not a native sport, whereas Indians are following hockey. It's they're hockey mad. They're not as mad as they are with cricket, but they still love their hockey. So it's a real avenue, especially when you've got some of the best hockey players running around that they would want to consume more of it.
Yeah, correct. And just speaking to them, they're going to bring back the Indian Hockey League, which is a great opportunity for the players to make some money too. Because it's still we do pay our players, but it's not enough to get along. So I think it's a really good opportunity for them. So yeah, we got our games into Star Sports over there, and that's just the start, hopefully, and we can get it through ESPN in Argentina and BT Sport in the UK as well.
And it is that flow-on effect, like you said. You're either playing and you want to go see the Stars in action, or you've watched them in Paris and you're like, oh, now they're back. You can go see them in Adelaide, you can go see them in Melbourne, you can go see them in Brisbane. It sort of just has that flow-on effect and helps connect like that next generation with the current generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a sport that really, to appreciate it, you've got to watch it live at the venue. It's a really quick sport. It's fun to watch. I must admit, I've just taken up playing on a Monday night in Masters Comp. So I've played my 4 games, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And I remember in golf we talked about it being a cradle to grave sport. That's what hockey is as well. You can play it from the age of 4 all the way up to there are 80-year-olds running around, and that's where our job is to maximise the opportunities we have and get people along to games and then linking them back into a local club.
Terrific. You did touch a little bit on it before. I just wanted to ask your advice for people who are saying, "Hey, I want to get into sport. I love my footy, or I love my cricket, or I love my basketball." Why should someone come into sport, but come into a sport they don't know, like hockey? Like, what does just going into a sport because you want to get into the business of sport? No matter where your fan passion lies, why is that just as important, if not more?
It gives you a breadth of experience. I've never worked in the AFL. I know people who have, and with it being such a big industry, you do tend to get pigeonholed, and that's where the advice that came to me very early on in my sports career is you've got to see yourself more than just a salesperson. So organisations, and hockey's not a small organisation, but smaller than cricket and AFL, you can do more and you can get more experience, and it's fun. And you get to work with tremendous people, and the athletes are fantastic, very down to earth. But also, it's around putting up your hand, saying I want to do more, and you can. So there's a bigger breadth of opportunities to grow your career. There's always time where if you want to go into the bigger sports, you can. But working on hockey events and national champs and broadcast and commercial, it's great.
And you do get to participate in one of the biggest sports events in the world every 4 years, or in Com Games. So you still get that exposure to massive events. It's just not in a 22 weeks setting that might happen in an AFL or a cricket. It's 14 to 15 very intense days when it's on, and 60 to 90 to 180 days of really intense preparation work leading up to it. But it's a different kind of pressure and a different kind of a sports business than your standard week in, week out. What was the result? Who are we playing this week? What are we doing next week? It's a completely different challenge, and like I said, offers you a lot of scope to grow. It does,
and being involved in Olympic sports, there's something special. We're very close as a group of CEOs, even with the AOC, and there's just something special when you lead a sport into battle at an Olympic Games or a Com Games, and you're all in it together. You feel like you're all in it together. Whereas if you work for a sports team, and I work for Melbourne City, and we were the smaller team in town against Melbourne Victory, you feel like the world's against you. But here, it's all in together. It's really special.
Terrific. David, I just want to close things out with the Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I do. I was 4. My dad took me to the MCG, and Hawthorn played North Melbourne, and it was a draw. That's all I remember.
It's a draw?
I'm not a Hawthorn or North Melbourne supporter, but that's all I remember.
Terrific. Well, you would have been a fair few sports events in your time, whether working capacity or as a fan. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food when you're at a sports event?
I remember being in Manchester. It would have been the third Test match of the 2005 Ashes, arguably the best cricket series of all time. And they're known up there for their meat pies and mushy peas and gravy. Being in Manchester, so I reckon that was the best I've had.
Terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Twitter, much to my wife's chagrin. I get all my news from Twitter. I get all my news.
And your assessment in the last 6 months since Elon's taken it on, is it better, worse, the same?
I try not to get too political. I'll just keep following my news.
So it's just a consumption. It's just a feed of news, and he hasn't mucked around with that too much. You're still getting most of it.
I'm still getting most of it. I must admit, probably it's on par my Twitter consumption with WhatsApp, as most people have probably got a million groups that they're part of. So you wake up and there's probably 150 messages you haven't read. But
yep,
yeah, they're probably my first two.
Terrific. Is there someone that you either follow on social media or an author you read that the podcast listeners should follow, and why?
I follow a gentleman called Bill George. I don't know if you know Bill George. He was part of Harvard Business School, still is, I think, and he is the master around authentic leadership. So there's a lot of articles that he's written. So if anyone's keen, have a look at it. Authentic Leadership, Bill George. I bought the book, and I'm going to go to HBS this year actually to do the Authentic Leadership course over. I think they do it over a week or two, but I think it's becoming more prevalent these days coming out of COVID, and workforces are changing, and how you deal with staff and people are different. So yeah, it's great. I fully recommend it.
Terrific. Bill George, Authentic Leadership. I'll look it up and put a link in the show notes. Lastly, you might have spoiled it, but that's okay. What social media platform is your MVP? And then maybe you can say which is the one that's performing the best for Hockey Australia.
I think Twitter, firstly, for me, but then what's working well for Hockey Australia is Instagram. So we've got a gun media and comms person who has followed the team, and so the content that she's getting now from both groups is phenomenal. And it's not about training, and it's not about playing. It's about, going to local
and getting to know them, and
local tailor in India, and how the boys like to make their coffee on tour, and the girls going out for coffee. So yeah, it's great. I think Instagram for sport and content is great.
Terrific. What is the best place to find you on the internet if someone was to listen to this podcast and say, I want to reach out and say thank you to David? Where would they go?
LinkedIn. I always try and I know I was one of those people 10 years ago where I was contacting people on LinkedIn and said, oh, can we have a chat or have a coffee, and I want to pick your brain. So always happy to give back. You sort of never forget. I don't forget how hard it was to get in. It is hard. Once you're in, it's great. So reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to have a chat.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time. I'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. But David, thanks very much for your time on the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate the opportunity.
Why not book a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan? Go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain.
Thanks again to David Pryles. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. Please look him up. Tell him that you listen to the podcast. I do really appreciate when people explicitly tell the guests that they listen to the podcast. It helps people realize that there are listeners out there, myself included. So David Pryles, Pryles, is how you can find him. And also, follow all things hockey. Follow the Hockey Roos, which is the women's hockey team. Follow the Kookaburras, which is the men's hockey team. And keep an eye on them on the lead up to Paris 2024, which again is not that far away. Before I finish up for this episode, I wanted to talk about a concept that I've been working. It's a big part of my keynotes now. I always use it. Part of developing keynotes and is to make make it tweetable, make it memorable, make it cohesive with what you're trying to do. And so one of the presentations or keynotes that I would normally do at SEAT was a collection of digital case studies from around the world and sort of highlight the best from around the world. And so I'd done that. I'd got a bunch of great case studies from the Portland Trail Blazers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, Arsenal, the AFL, NASCAR, Golden State Warriors, Socceroos, US football. I got all these great case studies, but what I want is that I wanted a theme. I wanted something to connect it. I wanted something to introduce it, to give it a bit of cohesiveness just overall, so people would hopefully remember it. So I had the presentation down, but I didn't have that hook. I didn't have the piece at the start. And so after 3 flights from Melbourne all the way across to Miami, 30 hours of travel, with my then teenage son Reese, who was interning at SEAT at the time, lucky enough to be able to go back because he interned the year before at Kansas City when I had a torn Achilles, and he wheeled me around, so he was lucky enough to come along to Miami as well, and very thankful for that. And so we'd done 30 hours flight, a bit tired, and I remember the moment vividly that we hopped in the Uber on the way to Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, and I went, I've got it. It all came together, and it came together with a few things, but I was trying to explain how digital has changed fandom and how fandom has changed because of digital. And I used one main photo, and it was the photo of David Putty, which is for Seinfeld fans, it's a really dated reference. It's a 90s reference, but again, that was the people I was talking to. But if you've ever watched Seinfeld, David Putty was the Devils player that dressed up full body paint, the Devils. And so that was a real 90s depiction of what a sports fan was. That's how a fan identified. They would paint their face. They would wear the jersey. That's how they would be known as in this case, a Devils fan. And my contention and what I pretty much put in the presentation and the connecting it all was digital is now that face paint. Your digital content allows fans to show that they're a fan of your team. That might be by using your hashtag. That might be by liking and commenting on your posts. That might be them creating their own content and showing their fandom. So my challenge, and it has been my challenge to content creators, digital teams, marketing folk in the sports space, is to make your content something that your fans identify with enough to like it, comment on it, share it, cheer it, amplify it, and feel like they're part of it. And so then that allows them as their digital identity to be able to show that they're a fan of your team. So digital is the face paint of this generation of fans. You don't have to physically paint your face, but you show that you're a fan of the team by all of the actions that you're doing online. And yes, every platform that we've now got does track that and does know that, and that's how they know that you're a fan. But also it helps with you from a fan development, fan growth, fan engagement perspective, because it starts training your fans to do what you want, but also to start seeing that your content is working. So, you want to be creating content that fans both identify with, but also helps become part of their identity. And so that's what digital face paint is. You need to be able to create more content that fans can use and show off that they're a fan of your team. So if you need a hand, if you want some help creating more digital face paint, creating content that absolutely smashes it, that goes viral, that engages your fans, please reach out. Happy to have a chat, either with a phone call to figure out how it can help, or have a pick my brain with your team, and let's figure out some really cool content that you could do to find that next generation of fans. That's it from me. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Don't miss out on the latest news and updates from the sports industry. Sign up for the Sports Geek News email newsletter today and stay informed on the latest trends, insights, and analysis from the world of sports. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. For more resources, go to sportsgeekhq.com.